Hi everyone, and welcome to Fluent English Journey. Don't forget to subscribe for daily English tips that will help you speak, listen, and write better. My name is Natasha, and today we are going to focus on two very important skills, listening and writing. By the end of this lesson, you will feel more comfortable understanding spoken English and expressing your ideas clearly in writing. Let's begin with a few simple questions. Have you ever traveled to a place where you did not speak the local language very well? How did you feel when you tried to talk to people? Or think about the last time you spoke with someone from another country. What was the hardest part for you? Was it understanding their accent? Or was it finding the right words to say? These situations are very common, and they are great opportunities to practice English in real life. Today, I want to share some personal stories that will help you understand how to handle these moments while improving your skills at the same time. Story 1. Learning from a small countryside town. Once, I traveled to a small town in the countryside. The people there spoke a dialect that I didn't understand very well. At the beginning, I felt nervous and unsure. I didn't know how to ask for directions, order food, or even say simple things in conversation. But I made a decision. Every day, I tried to speak a little more and listen very carefully. Slowly, something started to change. I began to feel more confident. I noticed something important. Even if I didn't understand every word, I could still understand the meaning by watching people's body language, listening to their tone, and paying attention to the situation. This experience helped me improve my listening and speaking at the same time. Story 2. Understanding fast speakers. Another experience happened when my husband and I were visiting a new city during a vacation. We needed a taxi, but the driver spoke very quickly. At first, I felt lost because I couldn't catch all the words. Instead of panicking, I focused on the important parts of his speech, keywords, tone of voice, and gestures. I also repeated back what I understood to make sure I was correct. This simple technique helped me communicate clearly, and it reminded me that listening carefully and asking polite questions can solve most problems. Writing helps you learn faster. One more thing I learned is that writing becomes much easier when you practice speaking and listening. After a long day of communicating in English, I would write down what happened, the new words I learned, how I expressed my ideas, what I wanted to improve. This habit helped me organize my thoughts, remember new vocabulary, and build natural-sounding sentences. The more I wrote, the more confident I became. Another travel story, asking for help at a museum. During another trip with my husband, we visited a museum in a new country. The staff spoke only the local language, and I didn't know how to ask for help at first. But then I reminded myself that I didn't need perfect English to communicate. I walked up to the counter and used simple expressions like, "Excuse me," and "Can you help me?" Even though my English wasn't perfect, the staff understood me and replied slowly and clearly. This moment showed me that you can communicate successfully even with basic English if you stay calm, try your best, and listen carefully. Another taxi story. In another city, a taxi driver spoke too quickly for me to follow. Instead of getting embarrassed, I politely asked him to slow down or repeat what he said. By listening for key words and focusing on the context, I was able to understand him after a few tries. These small interactions might seem simple, but they helped me improve a lot. And the more I practiced, the more natural speaking and listening felt. How listening helps your writing. One powerful lesson I learned is that listening to real-life English conversations helps you write better. When you listen to how people speak, how they structure sentences, and how they express emotions, you naturally learn how to write in a more clear and natural way. Here's a helpful tip. When you watch a movie, TV show, or YouTube video in English, don't focus only on the words. Pay attention to tone of voice, emotion, pauses, sentence patterns. Your brain will start thinking in English without you even noticing. The main message. Improving your English is not only about memorizing grammar or vocabulary lists. It's about real, everyday practice. Every conversation, whether it's in person, on the phone, or online, is a chance to learn. Every time you listen, speak, or write, you grow a little more confident. So next time you face a fast speaker or you want to express yourself in writing, remember these tips. Listen carefully. Watch for context clues. Use body language. Ask questions politely. Write about your experiences afterward. With daily practice, your English will improve naturally. Mistakes are part of learning, and every small effort makes a difference. Here at Fluent English Journey, we upload new lessons to help you grow every day. We post new content every day to help you improve your English skills. It might be a real-life story, a new set of vocabulary words, or a short grammar lesson, but each episode gives you another chance to learn and grow. And remember, it's okay if you don't understand everything the first time. Just keep listening, keep practicing, and little by little, speaking and writing in English will start to feel easier and more natural. The main idea is very simple. Practice makes progress. Every real-life experience teaches you something. Even small moments, like asking someone for directions, ordering food, or talking to a taxi driver, help you build confidence. These moments show you how to understand different accents, how to ask polite questions, and how to use the English you already know to communicate clearly. The more you listen and speak in English, the more naturally your brain will start to think in English. Small daily actions like paying close attention during conversations, repeating useful phrases, or writing down what you hear help you improve without stress. And always remember this, your English doesn't need to be perfect. Communication is about making yourself understood. Every time you try, you're learning. Every mistake helps you grow. Every attempt makes you more confident in both listening and writing. Confidence makes everything easier. When I visited the museum and spoke with the staff, I realized something very important. Confidence makes a huge difference. The more confident I felt, the easier it became to listen carefully and respond correctly. This is also true for you. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Most people appreciate the effort you put into speaking their language, and many will even try to help you. Just like I practiced during my trip, you can practice every day, even in very simple situations. Podcasts and videos can help you improve quickly. One of the best ways to build strong listening skills is by using podcasts or videos with subtitles. I often listen to stories where people talk about their everyday lives, their travels, or their personal experiences. They usually speak clearly and use simple language. When you follow along with subtitles, you can match the spoken words with the written words. This helps improve both your listening and your writing at the same time. I remember listening to a podcast where a woman talked about moving to a new country. She explained how she adapted to a new culture and how she learned a new language. While I listened, I wrote down some useful expressions she used. Later, I wrote my own story using similar phrases. This small exercise helped me improve my listening comprehension and my writing skills. When you listen to stories, you begin to notice common expressions, everyday phrases, and natural sentence structures. You also hear different accents and speaking styles, which helps you understand real conversations more easily. Over time, you may even start to understand idioms and slang, which will make your English sound more natural and fluent. Practice active listening. To improve even faster, try active listening. Don't just hear the words, pay attention to the meaning behind them. Notice the speaker's tone, their emotion, and the way they connect ideas. Real stories provide context, which makes the language easier to understand. This kind of listening will help you respond more naturally in conversations, write clearer sentences, and express your ideas with confidence. Make this a habit. Listen to English every day, even if it's only for a few minutes. Use podcasts, videos, audiobooks, or conversations with friends. Repeat the phrases you hear. Write them down and use them in your own sentences. Every small step builds your confidence. Soon, understanding different accents, replying quickly, and writing clearly will feel much easier. Immerse yourself in real English. My simple advice is this: immerse yourself in real English stories. Pay attention to how people speak, the words they choose, and how they express feelings in different situations. Use subtitles to support your learning. Repeat the phrases you like. Write your own stories using the new vocabulary you learn. This daily, natural practice will make your English stronger, clearer, and more fluent. Confidence, listening, and consistent practice always work together. The more you listen and try, the faster you will improve. Improve writing through reading. I also improved my writing by paying attention to how other people write. I read short stories, blog posts, and personal experiences written by people who lived in different countries. These real-life stories showed me how to organize ideas, connect sentences, and express thoughts clearly. Inspired by them, I started writing about my own experiences, places I visited, things I tried, or moments that were meaningful to me. Writing like this helped me expand my vocabulary, improve my sentence structure, and become more confident in expressing myself. Writing forces you to think carefully about how to describe things, and this makes both your writing and your thinking stronger. The key lesson. The most important lesson is this: real-life English is powerful. Listening to real stories and writing about your own experiences helps you understand how English works in everyday situations. When you listen closely and pay attention to how people communicate, you naturally begin to use the same strategies in your own speaking and writing. To benefit the most, make it a daily habit. To make real progress in English, try to listen to English podcasts every day, read real-life stories, and write about your own experiences. One of the biggest challenges when learning a new language is feeling confident enough to use it in real situations. Many learners feel scared of making mistakes or not understanding everything. But mistakes are normal. They are a natural part of learning, and they actually help you improve faster. I remember one experience that helped me build my listening and speaking skills. A few years ago, I had to attend a work meeting where everyone spoke English. At that time, I wasn't confident with fast conversations, and I was afraid I would miss important information. When the meeting began, I understood the general topic, but I missed many details. People spoke quickly, and sometimes I couldn't follow the discussion. At first, I felt overwhelmed, but I didn't let that stop me. I listened carefully, took notes, and asked polite questions whenever I didn't understand something clearly. Slowly, something interesting happened. I began to catch more words and familiar phrases, and eventually I felt brave enough to join the conversation with my own ideas. That moment taught me something very important. You don't need to understand every single word to participate successfully. Even if you only understand the key points, you can still respond, contribute, and learn at the same time. This experience strengthened my belief that confidence and practice are more important than perfection. The more you listen, the more natural English becomes. The more you speak, the more your confidence grows. And the more you write, the easier it is to connect ideas and build clear sentences. So whether you're listening to someone talk about their travels, reading a blog post, describing your own day, or participating in a meeting, every small effort helps you improve. Use these everyday opportunities to practice. Notice patterns. Repeat useful phrases. And remember, improvement happens slowly but surely. Real-life stories, active listening, and consistent writing practice build your fluency, confidence, and practical communication skills. A conversation that boosted my confidence. During that same work meeting, I struggled to understand all the details. People spoke quickly, they used business vocabulary I didn't know, and my mind felt tired from trying to keep up. But then I reminded myself I don't need to understand everything. I only need to understand the main idea. So I changed my strategy. I listened for the key points. I focused on familiar words. I watched people's reactions and body language. At one moment, someone asked me a question. I didn't fully understand it, and I wasn't sure what to say. Instead of panicking, I took a slow breath and used simple words to share my thoughts. I said, "I'm not sure if I understood everything correctly, but I think you're asking about," and then I explained my idea. The person smiled and said I understood correctly. That small moment gave me a huge boost of confidence. It showed me that I didn't need perfect English, I just needed to communicate clearly. Focus on communication, not perfection. This experience taught me another powerful lesson. When you need to speak English, don't aim for perfection, aim for communication. Even native speakers make mistakes. They forget words. They stop to think. They ask for clarification. If you don't understand something, there are simple and polite phrases you can use. Could you repeat that, please? Could you explain that in a different way? I didn't catch that. Can you say it again? These expressions make conversations smoother and help you learn faster. Listening more helps you speak better. After that meeting, I decided to practice more seriously. I listened to English podcasts every day, watched movies with subtitles, and tried to speak with English speakers whenever possible. The more I listened, the more natural English felt. I began to hear the same words and expressions in many different situations. Slowly, I started using those expressions myself, and speaking became easier, clearer, and more confident. One of my favorite ways to practice listening was by watching interviews with famous people. Interviews are very useful because most speakers use natural, simple language. You can hear how they explain their ideas, how they ask questions, and how they respond politely. I also noticed how they use tone, pauses, and small gestures to communicate meaning. By paying attention to these details, I learned not only vocabulary, but also how to communicate more effectively. How listening helps you write better. I also discovered that listening and writing are connected. When I listened carefully to stories, I noticed how sentences were structured and how ideas were connected. Later, when I wrote about my own experiences, I naturally used those same patterns. For example, after listening to someone describe a trip or a meeting, I would write a short story about a similar moment in my life. This simple routine helped me build better sentences, use new vocabulary, and express myself clearly. The big lesson. The main message is this: don't focus on being perfect. Focus on understanding and communicating clearly. Listen actively. Notice patterns. Repeat useful phrases. Use them in real conversations. And write regularly to strengthen your skills. With time, your English will feel more natural, more confident, and more fluent. Whether you're in a meeting, talking to a friend, or writing about your day, all these small practices help you grow. If you want, I can continue your script from the last line. I remember watching an interview with an athlete talking about his journey to success. At the beginning, it was very hard for me to understand everything the speaker said. His accent was new to me, and he talked quickly, so I often missed important words. But I didn't give up. I watched the interview again and again. I paused, replayed difficult parts, and wrote down new words in a small notebook. Instead of searching for every word, I tried to guess their meanings from the sentences around them. After doing this for a few weeks, I realized something amazing. I was finally able to understand more clearly, and my listening skills improved a lot. Another habit that helped me was writing about what I listened to. After watching an interview or listening to a podcast, I wrote a short summary using my own words. For example, I once listened to a podcast about traveling. After that, I wrote a small paragraph explaining what the guest talked about. Writing things down helped me remember new words, and it also made me more comfortable using them when I spoke with others. If you want to improve both listening and writing, try this simple method. Choose a short video or audio clip, listen to it, and then write just a few sentences about it. Don't worry about mistakes. The goal is to practice expressing your thoughts in English. Little by little, this habit will make you more confident. I also had another real-life experience where I had to use English unexpectedly. My husband and I went on a trip and stopped at a small restaurant in a country where English was not the main language. The waiter spoke English, but his accent was strong, and at first, I couldn't understand him well. Instead of feeling nervous or embarrassed, I listened carefully. I repeated the important words in my mind and paid attention to his expression and gestures. When I was unsure, I asked simple follow-up questions like, "Can you repeat that, please?" Or, "Do you mean this or that?" This experience reminded me that listening is not only about words. It also includes tone, body language, and context. After that trip, I decided to listen to different kinds of English accents. I watched videos from people around the world, travel vloggers, international speakers, and TED Talk presenters. I quickly noticed a big improvement. Even though the pronunciation was different, I could still understand the main ideas because I focused on context, not just individual words. Another method that helped me is called shadowing. Shadowing means listening to someone speak and repeating their words immediately after them. It feels a little strange at first, but it is a very powerful exercise. When you shadow a speaker, you're practicing listening, pronunciation, and rhythm all at the same time. You can start with a short clip from a movie or podcast. Listen to one sentence, repeat it, and try to match the speaker's speed and intonation. With enough practice, your speech will start sounding more natural. Understanding fast speech is another challenge many learners face. Native speakers often speak quickly, and sometimes the words blend together. One trick that helped me was focusing on the stressed words. In English, important words like nouns, verbs, and adjectives are usually stressed. If you listen for these words, you can understand the main idea even if you miss the smaller words. For example, in the sentence, "I really wanted to visit Paris last summer, but I didn't have time," you can still understand the message by listening for "really wanted, Paris, last summer, didn't have time." By practicing this skill, fast conversations became much easier for me. I want to share one last story. A few months ago, I met someone who was also learning English. We started talking about traveling. At first, the conversation was difficult because the person had a strong accent and spoke quickly. Instead of giving up, I focused on catching the key words, paying attention to their tone, and asking small questions when I needed more clarity. The conversation turned out to be enjoyable, and it reminded me how much my listening had improved. The most important lesson from all these experiences is simple. Listen actively, pay attention to context, and write about what you hear. Don't try to be perfect. Focus on understanding and communication. These small habits, practiced consistently, will slowly improve your listening, speaking, and writing skills. Over time, you will feel more confident in real-life situations, whether you are ordering food at a restaurant, talking with a friend, or joining a conversation with someone from another country. Sometimes, when I don't understand what someone said, I use simple phrases like, "Could you repeat that?" or "Do you mean this or that?" These small questions help me stay in the conversation and respond naturally. Asking for clarification also shows that I am listening carefully. This experience taught me how important patience and focus are when using English in real situations. The biggest lesson I learned is this: active listening, practicing different accents, and paying attention to important words can improve your understanding much faster than you expect. If you combine these habits with shadowing and writing short summaries of what you hear, your listening, speaking, and writing will all grow together. The more you practice, the more confident you become with fast speech, different accents, and everyday conversations. In the beginning, I noticed that many English learners struggle to find the right words when they speak. They worry too much about grammar or making mistakes. But the truth is, communication is not about speaking perfectly. It's about sharing ideas and connecting with people. I saw this in someone I met recently. They were nervous and stumbled over their words, but they kept trying. And guess what? I understood them completely. That moment reminded me that perfection is not the goal, connection is the goal. So if you ever feel nervous about speaking, remember this. Your goal is to communicate, not to be perfect. Keep listening, keep practicing, and don't be afraid of mistakes. The more you hear real conversations, the easier everything becomes. You start to recognize patterns, understand new expressions, and feel more confident expressing your thoughts. One of the most important lessons I learned about English is that real progress comes from consistent practice and exposure. Listening is especially important. When you listen regularly, you get familiar with the sounds, rhythm, and flow of English. But listening is not only about hearing words. It's about understanding the message, recognizing patterns, and connecting ideas. I remember when I finally decided to improve my listening seriously. I thought my English was already good because I knew lots of vocabulary and grammar rules. But when I listened to real conversations, I struggled. Native speakers talked quickly. They used contractions, slang, and informal expressions that I had never seen in textbooks. It was frustrating. I felt like I knew English, but still couldn't follow real conversations. One day, I was sitting in a cafe near a group of native speakers. I tried to listen to what they were talking about, but at first I only caught a few words. Instead of giving up, I focused on the general idea of the conversation, not on every single word. I watched their expressions, listened to their tone, and paid attention to their gestures. Slowly, I began to understand more. I realized that context and body language are powerful tools when listening to English in real life. Another helpful strategy was paying attention to key words. In English, speakers naturally stress important words like nouns, verbs, and adjectives. Even if I miss some small words, I can still understand the main idea. For example, in the sentence, I really wanted to visit Paris last summer, but I didn't have time. The key words are really wanted, Paris, last summer, didn't have time. Just by hearing those, you get the message. Practicing this helped me follow fast conversations much more easily. I also discovered how powerful it is to write while listening. After listening to a story, a podcast episode, or an interview, I wrote a short summary in my own words. For example, after a travel podcast, I wrote a brief paragraph about what the speaker said. Writing helped me remember new vocabulary, organize my thoughts, and become more confident when speaking. This combination of listening and writing is especially effective for learners who want to build fluency step by step. Listening to different accents also made a huge difference. Many learners focus only on American or British English, but real English exists in many forms. So I watched videos from people all around the world, international interviews, travel vloggers, TED Talks, and more. This helped me understand different pronunciations and speech patterns. I also practiced shadowing. Shadowing means listening to a speaker and repeating what they say right away. This exercise improved my pronunciation, rhythm, and confidence. Even though it felt strange at first, it made my speech sound more natural. And, of course, I learned to accept mistakes. Mistakes are normal. Even native speakers forget words or ask for clarification sometimes. When I don't understand something, I simply ask, "Could you repeat that?" Or, "Can you explain that in a different way?" These phrases make conversations smoother and help me understand better. The most important lesson I learned is this: Active listening, regular practice, and simple strategies will help you improve little by little. Another time, I was in a cafe again, sitting near a group of English speakers. At first, I could only pick up a few words. But then I observed their tone and body language. I realized they were talking about weekend plans. One person seemed excited about a trip, while another wasn't sure what to do. Even though I missed many words, I still understood the main idea. That moment showed me that you don't need to understand every single word to follow a conversation. If you focus on the key words and overall context, you can still understand the message. This skill is essential because people in real life do not speak like textbooks. Many English learners struggle because native speakers speak fast. They shorten words, mix ideas, and sometimes change topics without warning. This is normal in real conversations. That's why learning to follow the flow of a conversation is more important than trying to understand every single word. After that day in the cafe, I completely changed how I practice listening. I stopped listening passively and started practicing active listening. Active listening means paying close attention to how people speak, noticing important words, and thinking about the meaning behind what they say. One method that helped me a lot was watching English TV shows with subtitles. The first time, I used subtitles in my native language so I could understand the story. The second time, I used English subtitles to connect the spoken words with the written words. Finally, I tried watching without subtitles. It was difficult at first, but after some time, my brain started recognizing words and phrases naturally. This technique helped me understand real, natural English. Another powerful method was repetition listening. I listened to the same audio several times. The first time, I focused on understanding the general idea. The second time, I listened for key details. The third time, I repeated some sentences out loud. This trained my ear to recognize words faster and understand natural speech patterns. After doing this regularly, I noticed that following fast conversations became much easier. I also realized how important listening is in everyday life. A few months ago, I had to call customer service. The automated voice spoke very quickly, and I didn't understand everything at first. I stayed calm and listened for keywords like support, billing, press 1, and press 2. When I finally reached a real person, they spoke fast and used technical words I had never heard before. But instead of pretending to understand, I used simple strategies. I repeated keywords to confirm their meaning. I asked politely, "Could you explain that in a different way?" Or, "Could you slow down a little?" These phrases helped me keep the conversation clear, and in the end, I fixed the problem. That experience taught me that listening is not only about hearing words, it's about communicating. When you don't understand something, it's completely okay to ask questions. Another lesson I learned is that people don't mind repeating themselves. In fact, most people are happy to help if you ask politely. You don't need to feel embarrassed. Every conversation is a chance to improve your English. Another technique that strengthened my listening and speaking was shadowing. Shadowing means listening to a short clip and immediately repeating what you hear. This improved my pronunciation, rhythm, and fluency. Even when I didn't understand every word, repeating the sentences helped me remember them and use them later in conversations. Over time, I also understood the power of storytelling. Stories stay in your mind easily because they create pictures in your imagination. When I first started learning English, I listened to short stories every night before bed. At first, I didn't understand everything, but I kept listening. Slowly, I began to recognize familiar words, repeated phrases, and common sentence structures. Here is what I learned from all these experiences. 1. You don't need to understand everything perfectly. Focus on communication, not perfection. Your goal is to understand the main idea, not every tiny detail. 2. Listen for key words and stressed words. Speakers always stress important words, nouns, verbs, adjectives. These words help you understand the message more quickly. 3. Use the power of repetition. Rewatching the same video or re-listening to the same audio helps your brain learn faster. 4. Connect spoken English with written English. Using subtitles or writing short summaries helps you remember what you heard. 5. Ask questions when needed. Phrases like, "Could you repeat that?" and "Can you explain that another way?" keep the conversation flowing. 6. Be patient with yourself. Listening takes time. Every time you listen, you get a little better. 7. Practice with real-life situations. Listening to conversations in cafes, calling customer service, watching videos with different accents, all these experiences help you grow. 8. Listening is a skill you can train. With practice, patience, and real-world exposure, you will become more confident and fluent. The more you practice active listening, paying attention to key words, repeating what you hear, connecting sounds with text, and staying calm, the better you will understand natural English. Even though it feels challenging at first, every small step brings you closer to becoming a confident and fluent English speaker. I started my listening practice with very simple stories. At first, I chose short and easy stories because they were not too difficult to follow. As I became more comfortable, I slowly moved on to longer stories with more details and more complex language. This step-by-step approach helped me improve naturally without feeling stressed. Listening to stories taught me many things. I learned new words in context, which means I understood their meaning by hearing them used in real sentences. I also improved my ability to follow longer conversations because stories usually connect events and ideas in a clear way. This helped me understand how sentences flow in English, how people express emotions, and how ideas are linked together. If you want to try this method, start with short and simple stories. You can listen to audiobooks, podcasts, YouTube stories, or any listening material for learners. When you listen for the first time, don't try to understand every word. Just focus on the main idea. It's completely okay if you miss some words because the goal is to follow the story, not to be perfect. After you finish listening, try retelling the story in your own words. You can write a summary or speak out loud. This is a powerful exercise because it improves your listening and speaking at the same time. When you retell the story, you practice using the new words and expressions you heard. Listening to stories also helps with vocabulary. When you hear a word used in different situations, you understand its meaning more clearly. You also start to recognize patterns in storytelling, how people introduce characters, describe events, and show feelings. These patterns can make your own speaking and writing more natural and confident. The main thing to remember is that listening is a skill, and like any skill, it gets better with practice. It's not about understanding every single word. It's about catching the key ideas, noticing the context, and understanding the message. When you combine listening with speaking or writing, such as repeating sentences, summarizing stories, or discussing what you heard, you improve much faster. One of the best ways to strengthen your listening skills is to listen regularly. You can use audiobooks, podcasts, storytelling videos, or any English audio you enjoy. The first time you listen, focus only on the general meaning. The second time, listen more closely for new words. You can even repeat some sentences to improve your pronunciation and speaking rhythm. As you continue listening, you will notice that your brain starts recognizing words faster. At first, everything may sound fast or confusing, but with practice, it becomes easier and more natural. Your ears begin to pick up familiar sounds, and your mind starts understanding the meaning automatically. The key is to practice regularly and enjoy the process. Even if you don't see improvement right away, you are getting better every time you listen. Many learners ask how to make listening easier. The answer is consistency and active listening. Active listening means paying close attention to what you hear, focusing on details, and trying to understand the message. Passive listening, like playing English in the background, helps a little, but active listening helps much more. I remember one important moment in my own learning journey. I had been listening to podcasts and watching TV shows for many months, but I still struggled to understand fast conversations. One day, I was sitting in a park and overheard a group of people talking quickly about their jobs. I couldn't understand every word, and I felt frustrated at first. But then I decided to focus on key things: their tone, the familiar words, and the context of the conversation. Even without understanding every word, I realized they were talking about their work schedules and how much they enjoyed their jobs. This moment taught me that you don't need to understand everything to understand the main idea. Real conversations are not like textbooks. People speak quickly, shorten words, use slang, and switch topics suddenly. Your goal is not perfection. Your goal is to understand the main point and respond naturally. That is why focusing on keywords, tone, and context is more helpful than trying to catch every single word. Repetition is another powerful method. Listening to the same story several times helps your brain notice things you missed before. The first time, listen for the main idea. The second time, listen for details. The third time, try repeating some sentences out loud. This helps train your ears and improves your pronunciation. Combining listening with speaking or writing makes the practice even stronger. After you finish listening to a story, try writing a short summary or telling the story in your own words. You can also talk about it with a friend or even speak to yourself. This helps you remember new words and practice expressing your ideas clearly. The most important thing is to practice regularly, listen actively, and enjoy the process. Listen to stories, focus on keywords, pay attention to the tone, and repeat what you hear. The more you expose yourself to real English conversations, the more confident you will become. Over time, you will understand faster, speak more naturally, and feel more comfortable in everyday situations. Learning English is a long journey, but with steady practice, your listening skills will improve faster than you expect. I learned something very important about understanding English. When I first started learning, I believed that I had to understand every single word people said. I thought that real improvement meant catching every detail, every syllable, and every sentence. But over time, I realized that this idea was completely wrong. Understanding English is not about hearing every word perfectly. It's about understanding the main idea, the overall message, and the bigger picture of what someone is trying to say. In real life, people do not speak slowly or clearly like in textbooks. They speak fast, they use slang, they cut sentences short, and they jump from one idea to another. If you focus too much on each word, you often miss the meaning of the conversation. So instead of trying to catch every word, it's much better to listen for the main points. Try to understand what the speaker is really trying to express. This makes conversations easier, less stressful, and much more natural. One helpful way to practice this is by listening to conversations, podcasts, or videos without subtitles. At first, don't worry about understanding everything. Just try to understand the general idea. After you finish listening, ask yourself simple questions. What was the topic? What was the main message? What were the key points? Then listen again with subtitles or a transcript if it's available. Check what you missed, notice new words, and see how the ideas were connected. Doing this many times trains your brain to understand English faster. Your brain slowly learns to fill in the gaps, just like native speakers do. Even if you don't know some words, you can still understand the overall meaning. With practice, your mind becomes better at recognizing sounds, patterns, and common expressions. Another useful technique is changing the speed of the audio. Most videos, apps, and podcasts allow you to slow down or speed up the recording. This is a great way to train your ears. If the speaker is too fast, slow it down and listen carefully. When you feel comfortable, increase the speed little by little. This helps your brain process English more quickly, so you can understand both slow and fast speakers naturally. If you're wondering when to slow down or speed up, here is a simple rule. If you understand the main idea but miss details, slow it down. If you already understand most of it, speed it up to challenge yourself. This keeps your practice balanced and helps you improve steadily. I also learned a powerful lesson from a personal experience. A few months ago, I attended a large conference where people from many countries spoke English. Some had British accents, others had American accents, and some had accents I had never heard before, like Indian, Australian, or African accents. At first, it felt like I was listening to completely different languages. The pronunciation was so different that I could barely understand certain words. I started feeling nervous, but then I remembered something important. Accents are a natural part of English. English is a global language, and people all over the world speak it differently. Instead of panicking, I changed my focus. I listened not only to the words, but also to the rhythm, melody, and tone of each accent. I began noticing patterns. British English sounded more clear and crisp. American English had reduced sounds and softer vowels. Indian English had a musical rising and falling tone. Australian English often had a rising tone at the end of sentences. By paying attention to how people spoke, not only to the words, they became easier to understand. This experience taught me that understanding different accents is a huge part of improving listening skills. If you only listen to one accent, you might struggle when you hear other accents in real life. But if you expose yourself to many accents through movies, YouTube videos, podcasts, and conversations, you start understanding English much more naturally. At first, it feels hard, but your brain slowly adjusts to different sounds, rhythms, and speaking styles. Soon, you'll feel comfortable listening to English from almost anyone. Another technique that helped me a lot is called shadowing. Shadowing means listening to audio and repeating the words at the exact same time, almost like an echo. You try to match the speaker's pronunciation, speed, tone, and rhythm. It's more than repeating, it's copying the speaker as closely as possible. Shadowing helps improve listening, speaking, and pronunciation all at the same time. When I first tried it, I used short clips or short sentences. I listened carefully, then repeated exactly what I heard. At the beginning, it was difficult, but with practice, my listening became sharper and my pronunciation became smoother. At first, shadowing felt very challenging for me. I often stumbled over words, mispronounced sounds, and couldn't keep up with the speed of the speaker. Sometimes I had to stop in the middle because the sentences felt too long or too fast. But even though it was difficult, I didn't give up. I kept practicing a little every day. Slowly, something amazing happened. My brain began to recognize sounds much faster. Words that once felt difficult suddenly became familiar. My pronunciation became clearer, and I started repeating full sentences with much more confidence and accuracy. I also noticed that the more I practiced shadowing, the easier it became to understand people in real conversations, even when they spoke quickly or had accents I wasn't used to. Shadowing is powerful because it forces you to listen actively and respond instantly. You cannot be passive. You must focus on every sound, every rhythm, and every rise and fall in the sentence. You learn how words connect, how native speakers blend sounds, and how intonation changes the meaning. This technique is used by learners all around the world because it strengthens your listening and speaking at the same time. In simple words, shadowing trains your brain to think in English, not to translate from your native language. That's why it works so well. When I began shadowing, I realized how important it was to pay attention to small details in the audio. I listened carefully to how the speaker emphasized certain words, where they paused, and how their voice rose or fell. At first, I could not keep up with their speed. I repeated many sentences incorrectly, and I lost track of longer phrases. But after a few attempts, I started improving. My voice began to match the speaker more closely, and the rhythm felt more natural. It almost felt like I was speaking fluently along with them. My listening skills improved at the same time. I was able to catch more details, understand more phrases, and even notice subtle differences in tone and emotion. If you want to try shadowing, start with short clips, maybe 1 or 2 minutes long. Listen once, then repeat the sentences aloud. If something is unclear, pause the audio, look it up, and try again. Over time, your brain begins to recognize common patterns in pronunciation, stress, and sentence flow. Another method that helped me was listening to English news. News reports are clear, structured, and great for learning useful vocabulary. The first time I listened, I had to concentrate hard because some words were new. But after listening regularly, I began recognizing common expressions and understanding how anchors speak. I even learned how they emphasize important information. For example, when a reporter says breaking news, I quickly understood that something important had just happened. Of course, news can be difficult at first. Anchors speak quickly and use advanced vocabulary. The trick is to start with simpler stories, local news, or short human interest stories. As you improve, listen to more complex reports like national and international news. This gradual increase in difficulty trains your brain to understand different topics, speeds, and communication styles. Another important lesson from my listening journey is understanding context. Context is everything. It gives meaning to the words you hear. Even if you don't understand every single word, you can still follow a conversation if you understand the situation. For example, if someone says, "It's getting late. We should leave," you can guess the meaning easily because the context is clear. They are talking about leaving a place. When you focus on context, listening becomes less stressful. You stop worrying about each individual word and start paying attention to the bigger picture. This is how native speakers listen too. They don't catch every word. They simply understand the overall meaning. By combining these techniques, shadowing, listening to news, and focusing on context, you train your brain to understand English in real time. You start hearing patterns automatically. Conversations that once felt impossible become easier and clearer. Your confidence grows, and listening becomes more natural. English listening is no longer about catching every word. It becomes about understanding ideas, emotions, and intentions, the true purpose of any language. One important lesson I learned about listening in English is that understanding the main idea is more important than catching every word. In real conversations, people often speak quickly, shorten words, use slang, and sometimes don't finish their thoughts. If you focus too much on individual words, you may miss the overall meaning. Instead, try to pay attention to the topic and context. For example, if a conversation is about food, you can expect words related to cooking, recipes, or ingredients. If it's about work, you'll hear words about jobs, meetings, or deadlines. Knowing the context helps you predict what might be said next, making it easier to understand even if you don't know every word. One of the best ways to practice this is by listening to stories. Stories give you a sense of the bigger picture, allow you to anticipate what comes next, and show how natural conversations flow. When listening to stories, don't worry about understanding every word. Focus on the main ideas and notice how they connect. This helps your brain learn the rhythm and logic of English communication. I often listen to the same story multiple times. The first time, I focus on the general idea. The second time, I pay attention to details I missed. The third time, I try to retell the story in my own words, which helps me practice speaking and writing. Repetition is extremely helpful because it allows you to understand the flow better and feel more comfortable with the language. Over time, you'll be able to follow stories easily, remember key points, and even discuss them with others in English. To practice right now, choose an audio resource that interests you, a podcast, a YouTube video, or a short story. Listen once for the main idea. Then listen again for details. If there are words or phrases you don't know, look them up and notice how they are used in context. Repeat this process regularly, and your listening skills will improve steadily. Learning English is not just about memorizing vocabulary or grammar rules. It's about building a natural connection with the language, similar to how you connect with your native language. This connection grows through exposure, repetition, and active practice. The more you listen, the more your brain begins to think in English, rather than translating from your first language. This makes understanding conversations faster and easier. Here are some practical tips to stay motivated and make progress. Listen to English in different situations and formats. Switch between casual conversations in podcasts, formal discussions in news reports, or stories and audiobooks. This variety keeps your brain alert and helps you adapt to different accents, speeds, and vocabulary. Combine listening with other skills. Try shadowing, repeating what you hear, summarizing audio, or writing down main points. You can also retell a story to a friend. These active exercises strengthen your listening and speaking at the same time. Focus on main ideas, context, and repetition. Start small with materials you enjoy and gradually challenge yourself with more complex content. Over time, listening will feel faster, more natural, and more enjoyable. English will start to feel less like a set of rules to memorize and more like a language you can really use. Another important lesson I learned is that different environments affect how English is spoken and understood. Conversations at home are usually relaxed and casual, while at work or formal events, language is more structured and professional. If you only listen in one setting, you might miss these variations. For example, I used to listen to podcasts at home while doing chores. The environment was quiet, so it was easy to focus. One day, I tried listening on a bus. The background noise, chatter, and announcements made it much harder. At first, I struggled to catch words. But this was a valuable learning experience. I trained my ear to focus on the most important information, even with distractions. Over time, I realized I could understand conversations clearly, even in noisy or crowded places. The takeaway is clear: practicing in different situations is essential for improving real-life listening skills. Combine this with listening to stories, repetition, context awareness, and active exercises, and your English listening will improve faster than you expect. You might wonder, how do I know if I'm actually improving my English listening skills? One effective method is self-assessment. Every few weeks, go back to a podcast, video, or audio clip you listened to earlier. Compare how well you understood it then with how much easier it is now. You will notice progress, which can be very motivating. Even small improvements show that your practice is paying off. Another helpful technique is listening and summarizing. After listening to a conversation, story, or podcast, take a few minutes to summarize it in your own words. Don't just repeat the details word for word. Focus on the main ideas. For example, if you listen to a story about someone going to the beach, you might summarize: the person went to the beach to relax, had fun with friends, and enjoyed swimming. This practice strengthens your ability to connect listening, understanding, and speaking at the same time. When you summarize in your own words, your brain learns to process English in real time. You're not memorizing phrases, you're learning how to understand ideas, organize information, and communicate effectively. This also builds confidence. Instead of worrying about catching every single word, you start focusing on the overall meaning, which is what really matters in real conversations. Combining strategies like listening in different environments, self-assessments, and summarizing makes your practice more complete. It trains your brain to handle different accents, speeds, and background noises. Over time, listening in English starts to feel less like a challenge and more like a normal part of your daily life. You'll find that you can follow conversations in various situations, remember the main points, and even respond confidently. Another powerful way to improve listening is by interacting with others. For me, this has been one of the most enjoyable and effective methods. I remember attending a language exchange event with people from many countries, all speaking English. At first, it was challenging. There were unfamiliar accents and fast speakers, and I felt nervous. But I decided to participate and ask questions. This created a real exchange. People didn't just answer me, they asked about my life and experiences. I could practice listening and speaking at the same time. When I didn't understand something, I asked them to repeat it or explain it differently. This improved my ability to understand various speech patterns and accents while building confidence. Language exchange is effective because conversations are unpredictable. You never know exactly what the other person will say next, so your brain has to process language quickly and naturally. Even if you don't understand everything at first, staying engaged, asking questions, and following the conversation trains you to listen actively. This experience also highlighted the importance of context. Have you ever listened to a conversation and felt lost even though you knew most of the words? This often happens when you don't understand the situation, topic, or background. Context helps you predict what might come next and understand words or phrases that might otherwise be confusing. For example, if someone says, "It's getting late. We should leave soon," you don't need to understand every word to know it's time to go. Context also helps interpret tone, emotions, and intentions. By combining active listening with context awareness, you start to understand English in a more natural way. Interacting with others also strengthens your speaking and writing skills. The more you summarize what you hear or respond in conversation, the better you become at expressing your own thoughts clearly. Over time, your brain begins to process English in real time, rather than translating word by word from your native language. This makes listening feel natural and allows you to respond confidently, even with fast speakers or unfamiliar accents. One of the greatest advantages of this method is that it makes listening practice dynamic and engaging. You're not passively hearing words. You're reacting, asking questions, and exchanging ideas. This active participation trains your brain to think in English, process information quickly, and follow the flow of natural speech. The key is to stay curious and patient. You don't need to understand everything immediately. Focus on following the main ideas, asking for clarification when needed, and gradually your ability to comprehend spoken English will improve significantly. In short, interacting with others, practicing active listening, and paying attention to context are essential strategies for mastering real-life English. By combining these approaches, you train yourself to understand spoken English as it is naturally used, fast, varied, and full of nuance, while building the confidence to communicate effectively. Another key part of improving your English listening is understanding context. Context means knowing who is speaking, what the situation is, and why they are talking. For example, if two people are discussing going to a movie and one says, "I hope we get good seats," it makes perfect sense in that situation. Without context, the sentence might be confusing or meaningless. Understanding context helps you predict what might be said next and makes it easier to follow conversations. One of the biggest challenges for English learners is fast speech. Native speakers often talk quickly, link words together, use contractions, and sometimes even change the pronunciation of common words. In casual conversations, words can blend together, making it hard to catch everything. If you've ever felt lost during a fast conversation, you're not alone. I remember the first time I listened to a group of native speakers. I caught some words here and there, but by the time I understood one sentence, they had already moved on to the next topic. It was frustrating, but I decided not to give up. Instead, I found ways to train my ears for fast English. One effective method is slowed listening. I used a podcast that allowed me to slow down the audio. I listened to a short section slowly, pausing to repeat any words or phrases I didn't understand. Then I listened to the same section at normal speed. This exercise trained my brain to catch words more easily and helped me get used to the speed of native speakers. Over time, I began understanding fast conversations more naturally. Another very effective technique is shadowing. Shadowing means listening to a sentence and immediately repeating it aloud, copying the speaker's pronunciation, rhythm, and intonation as closely as possible. At first, it can feel difficult because you may not be able to keep up, but with practice, it becomes easier. Shadowing trains your brain to follow the natural flow of English, improves your listening, and also strengthens your speaking and pronunciation. It combines listening and speaking into one powerful practice session. It's important to remember that not all English speakers talk the same way. Some speak clearly and slowly, while others speak quickly with regional accents. That's why it's important to practice listening to a variety of voices, accents, and speeds. Exposure to different speakers trains your brain to understand English in real life, not just in textbooks or slow recordings. The combination of understanding context, practicing slowed listening, and shadowing makes a huge difference. You start to recognize speech patterns, anticipate words and phrases, and follow conversations more easily. Over time, even fast, casual conversations become much clearer. You don't need to understand every single word to follow the meaning. Instead, your focus shifts to main ideas, tone, and intention, which is exactly how native speakers communicate. With consistent practice, you will feel more confident listening to English in any situation, whether it's a casual chat, a formal meeting, or a noisy environment. Your brain will adapt to different accents, speeds, and styles, and listening will start to feel natural rather than stressful. Real improvement happens gradually through practice, exposure, and patience. Another important lesson I learned is that not all speakers talk the same way. People speak differently depending on their background, education, or region. They may have different accents, use unique expressions, or pronounce words in their own way. If you only practice one type of English, like American English, you might struggle with British, Australian, or Indian English. I experienced this when I watched a British TV show for the first time. Even though I was confident in my listening skills, I found some phrases difficult. Words were pronounced differently, and there was slang I had never heard. Instead of getting frustrated, I decided to watch more British content and look up unfamiliar words. Over time, I got better at understanding British English, and following conversations became much easier. So, how can you practice listening to different accents? A simple way is to watch videos or listen to podcasts from speakers with diverse backgrounds. For example, watch interviews with people from different countries and pay attention to how they speak. Notice their rhythm, pronunciation, and tone. The more you expose yourself to a variety of accents, the easier it becomes to understand English in real life. You can also use subtitles at first to help understand unfamiliar accents. Then, gradually try watching without them. Over time, your ear will adapt, and understanding different accents will feel more natural. Another excellent way to improve listening is through real-life listening activities. One exercise that worked very well for me was listening to customer service calls. These are recordings of real conversations between customers and employees in various situations, such as ordering food at a restaurant or asking for help in a store. Because the conversations are natural, you hear real speech, including hesitations, repetitions, and casual expressions. I remember listening to a recording of a customer calling a hotel to book a room. At first, I struggled because the customer spoke quickly and used informal phrases. But after listening several times, I began to catch the main ideas and understand the flow of the conversation. By replaying the recording, focusing on tricky words, and noting new expressions, I gradually became comfortable with the speed and style of natural speech. This type of practice is valuable because it exposes you to real-world English, not just textbook sentences or slow audio. Listening to different accents and real-life conversations also trains you to expect the unexpected. In real life, people may pause, repeat themselves, or speak differently than you anticipate. Practicing with these variations prepares your brain to adapt quickly and understand English as it is actually spoken. Over time, your listening becomes more flexible and you gain confidence in following fast, casual, or unfamiliar speech. By combining exposure to varied accents, real-life audio, and repeated listening, you train your brain to recognize patterns, understand different pronunciations, and catch key points even when speech is fast or informal. This builds practical listening skills that will help you communicate effectively in any situation. Listening to English in real-life situations is one of the best ways to improve your skills. I found that when I listened to people multiple times, I started to catch more details each time. This repetition helped me become familiar with how people speak in everyday situations, including how they pause, emphasize words, or change their tone depending on the context. If you live in an English-speaking country, you can practice by paying attention to conversations around you in stores, coffee shops, on public transportation, or at work. Notice how people interact naturally, use casual phrases, and respond to each other. Even short interactions can teach you a lot about real-life English. If you don't live in an English-speaking country, you can still practice by watching interviews, vlogs, and reality shows where people have unscripted conversations. These are helpful because they show English as it is actually spoken, not in textbooks or prepared speeches. I once had a funny experience in a coffee shop. I was waiting in line while the person in front of me was ordering a complicated drink. The barista asked, "Would you like that iced or hot?" But the customer didn't hear and kept talking about their order. The barista repeated, "Iced or hot?" and finally, the customer understood. This small interaction reminded me how important active listening is. Sometimes we miss important words because we are thinking about what to say next or because background noise distracts us. Active listening means fully concentrating on what someone is saying, not just hearing the words. One way to practice active listening is by summarizing what you hear. After listening to a conversation, podcast, or story, try to explain it in your own words. For example, if you hear a story about someone's first day at a new job, you might summarize it like this: the person was nervous but excited. They met their new coworkers and learned about their responsibilities. This exercise helps you focus on main ideas, improve memory, and process information in English naturally. Another helpful exercise is predicting what will happen next in a conversation. When listening to a dialogue, try to guess what the speaker might say based on the context. For example, if someone says, "I can't believe how busy today is," you might predict that the next sentence could be about tasks they need to complete or problems they are facing. This technique trains your brain to anticipate language, making following conversations faster and easier. By practicing active listening, summarizing, and predicting, you train your mind to focus on the important parts of spoken English. Over time, this makes it easier to understand casual conversations, follow fast speakers, and pick up details you might have missed before. These strategies also help you become more confident in real-life situations. Whether you're chatting with friends, participating in a meeting, or simply listening to people around you, Listening in context, paying attention, and actively engaging with the language are all keys to becoming a stronger, more confident English listener.